Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bottom bum bum bottom ba-da-da 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 ba-ba-ba. You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, I hear something. A signal, like from the depths of the ocean. It's like the voice of the angels, the language of heaven. A book club is calling. Yes! It's our final installment of our Spectrum Book Club, Issue 6, with creators Rick Quinn and Dave Chisholm from Mad Cave Studios. Oh, you made a sad sound.
I did.
It is kind of bittersweet.
We have been doing the Spectrum Book Club since, I think we recorded in October of last year, released that first episode in November of last year. And yeah, like I am sad that we're done. And like, I think I read all of Spectrum almost more than a year ago at this point, which I know has been a bone of contention for Lisa.
Yeah.
The fact that I read the entire thing
and
all
now
at
he
once.
can lord it over me that he's now read it twice. So he's like, well, I must be twice the fan
I
that you are.
actually have read it 3 times, Lisa.
Okay,
because I reread it in preparation for this final conversation with Rick and Dave. But we have been living with this comic for a long time. And
I did technically reread that. I know that I should let the show go on, but I did read each issue twice except for the 6th issue.
Right. What I'm saying is I read the entire thing 3 times.
It's a
competition.
Contest.
Yeah.
It's a contest that I'm losing,
right.
But I want to lose it accurately.
Okay.
I've read each issue twice.
Okay. Except for the last issue.
Except for the last issue, which I read once.
Okay. The point is...
But you did cheat.
We've already argued whether I cheated or not. Like, what I did was act in my nature, right?
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
Does a cheetah cheat because they eat all the creatures around them? You know, they're the fastest, so they're going to eat the most. You know, is that how a cheetah works? I don't know.
I don't know, and I mean, like, that is the laws of nature.
Man,
so
I have totally lost track of what I was trying to do in setting up this episode, but I think it had something to do with just saying how we've lived with this story for a long time, and it's weird to finally let it go now.
Let it go for a time, because it was left open-ended. Dave and Rick do want to continue it. And it will, of course, always live with us in our hearts and in our imaginations. But I'm also one of those people who does get sad at the end of a thing. When I was a kid, at the end of every party, it was the exclamation point was always me crying.
Yeah, and when you say it as a kid, like, that really hasn't changed.
Still to this day.
You know, like, when a con comes to a close, Lisa's feeling pretty
Wistful.
bittersweet. Yeah. But here we are with the final episode, or at least the final episode for now in our Spectrum Book Club series. We really enjoyed what Dave and Rick were doing here. And I know, Lisa, you had a lot of anxiety about whether or not this series would wrap up and stick the landing in the way that you wanted it to.
Yeah.
But here we are. Did it do it?
You'll have to listen and find out.
Oh, that's called a teaser.
Though it would be super awkward with our friends Rick and Dave if I was not satisfied.
You'll hear the answer in the conversation itself. So it's exciting to be here. And another exciting thing that happened this week is that Lisa and I wrote our very first press release.
And I also learned that a press release is another name for an email that feels really vulnerable and people are allowed to ignore.
I just think... so like we write this thing up and then we send it out into the void. We emailed like 100 different outlets and crossed our fingers and hoped that people would pick it up. And a lot of people did pick it up.
Which we appreciate greatly.
Shout out to the Geekly Grind and the San Diego Comic-Con unofficial blog, Broken Frontier Fanbase Weekly, David Harper over at Sketched. But of course, like the San Diego Union Tribune didn't like stop the presses and publish our press press release. But I just think that's karma, right? Because we have ignored a lot of press releases in our day.
Oh, yeah. And it's all part of the thing.
Yeah, it's the game. It's the game. And really the only people we want to know about this anyway are our beautiful listeners. But we officially announced our comic shop road trip. Yes, we have talked about it in the past. We will be launching on July 12th from Four Color Fantasies in Winchester, Virginia, and traveling across the country, hitting up various comic book shops and comic book landmarks, and arriving 10 days later at Now or Never Comics in downtown San Diego. And here's the big news. We'll be recording a live podcast from their shop at 7 o'clock that night with special guest Daniel Warren Johnson.
Yay! This has been in the works for so long, and the fact that the plan is all coming together is so genuinely exciting. We've done panels and stuff, but we've never done a live podcast. So this is really like a proof of concept,
Yeah.
as much as it is it's our very first event.
Yeah.
And I've got the butterflies.
Yeah, and I totally understand that I share those butterflies with you, Lisa, but we know we're going to fill this store up thanks to Daniel Warren Johnson.
That's right. Any lack of confidence we have in ourselves.
They will be doing a signing before the podcast. Hopefully, the signing happens, then some people stick around to actually enjoy the conversation. But I'm confident that we are going to fill those seats. We're looking to fill about 100 seats, and we will have seats for you, the listener. If you're a Comic Book Couples Counseling listener and you want to be there at 7 o'clock on July 22nd to witness our very first live podcast recording, reach out to us, cbccpodcast@gmail.com, or, direct message us on any one of our social medias at CBCC Podcast.
The event is free, but space is limited for the actual podcast recording. So we do have to get your name on the list. So if you are in the San Diego area, or if you're dorks like us and you get into San Diego for Comic-Con early, please come. We'd love to see you. We'd love to meet you. And we would love to fill these seats.
Yeah. And if you're not satisfied with a Daniel Warren Johnson signature, we will also have stickers and buttons. And cartoonist Mark Jackson of Mark Makes Comics has done this gorgeous comic shop road trip print for us. And we will have those at the shop to give away as well.
We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. We'll spend some quality time with you. We will give you a high five. We will give you a gift. We'll give you a compliment if that's what you need. We're here to fill your love tank.
And if you go to the show notes of this episode, you'll find a link with more details regarding our comic shop road trip. It's actually really tricky to figure out the timing of this 10-day journey. If we want to go to Jerry Siegel's childhood home in Cleveland, but also Metropolis in Illinois, but also Mile High Comics, but also the Jack Kirby exhibit, but also all these rad shops.
It sounds like so much math, which neither of us are good at.
And we have to do it all within 10 days. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do all the things we want to do. So we can't really figure out where we're going to be on what days. We know we're going to leave on the 12th, and we know we're going to arrive on the 22nd. Where we're going to be on any given day between, no clue.
And the reason we say that is we could be near you at any time.
Yes, so follow our social medias closely, because if we do go to a shop near you, we'd want to meet up.
You.
And if you think there is a particular store that we should visit, let us know.
I know how we can visit every single comic shop in the contiguous United States in our allotted 10 days, traveling on a metaphysical train created by the energy and creativity in song.
Oh, like in our book club selection Spectrum, Lisa.
Yet another seamless segue by the Gullicksons.
Yes, as we've already stated, this is our final, for now, episode on the Spectrum series from Mad Cave Studios with writer Rick Quinn and artist Dave Chisholm.
When we started the Comic Book Couples Counseling podcast, we did not know what it would become, but this is certainly a manifestation of the dream, the ability to go issue by issue of a series that's really special and important to us with the creators of that series
Yeah.
and pick their brains. This has been such a profound privilege. And I feel like it has deepened my relationship with my creativity and what the function of creativity is in our world.
Yeah.
Like today we were literally just watching the Pee-wee documentary.
Yeah, Pee-wee as himself on Max, which will soon be HBO Max, Lisa.
That's right.
Rebranding.
Growing up, I was not a Pee-wee kid.
Sad.
It was super colorful, and I felt like he was like yelling at me. And I've always I do have this level of discomfort with adults acting like children.
Uh-huh.
And Brad and I went on a walk today, and I dug into that a little bit. Maybe I made some progress. I don't know. That's none of your business. But the part of the documentary I found myself really connecting with is that Paul Rubens had this spirit of boundaryless play that went from his time at an art school all the way through making Pee-wee's Playhouse, and how profoundly subversive he was on every single one of his platforms. But he still genuinely wanted to connect with the audience that was there. So in the context of Pee-wee's Playhouse, the subversion was giving children permission to be weird, to be themselves, and to just create and be creative.
And to question the societal narrative. You know, it was preaching kiddie counterculture.
Absolutely. And I think that like just that permission of like, you know, you could just make a thing and you don't have to follow any rules. You don't, as long as you're not hurting anybody, you get to make your world what you want it to be. And I think like connecting that back to Spectrum, when we are creatives in this world, we're all creating like these frequencies that we kind of just emit, and then we find resonant frequencies that are like our frequencies. You know, we've had this conversation a lot about how art is way more about finding like-minded people than it is about changing people's minds a lot of the time. And I think that when you're given the creative freedom to do something truly new and different, that is how we do travel through space and time. That's how we create this linear connection from our influences to whatever the next thing is going to be.
Yeah, you know, through these conversations that we've been having with Rick and Dave, I've been latching on to this notion of how we are all connected through art. Like, what art does is connect us to every person on the planet now, but also every person that's going to be on the planet, and also every person that's been on the planet. And I think what Rick in particular has done for me is show how art is not actually an exclusive club, that many people are practicing art, are creating all the time. You just might not notice it, and they might not notice it either.
We started this episode about Spectrum issue number 6 talking about, was I going to be satisfied with the resolution of this story? Because I just felt like there were so many intriguing threads that I wanted to pull on, and so many interesting like little nooks and crannies in this universe we had yet to explore. But what I think I discovered, I guess spoilers, I had kind of lost connection with what I really wanted answered. And I feel like this issue does such a good job reminding us what the actual story is.
Yeah.
And bringing that to a conclusion and letting all of those other delicious questions just kind of hang in the universe. And I can get excited for more Spectrum, or I can just noodle on these questions on my own and expand in the universe in my imagination, which is so fun. So what this issue is actually about is Ada is looking for her father, and the only way to connect back to her dad is through his record collection and through his art. So she finally finds it within herself to sing a song that he loved for him, and she finds him, and it turns out that he has the secret key to defeat Echo. Meanwhile, Melody finds her dad, who isn't really her dad, but actually this godlike cosmic being who is trying to control the narrative. And Melody tells him, no, I am going to improvise. I'm not going to do what you say. And of course, they have their final showdown for Echo. Ada gets this beautiful punctuation on her story with her dad. And Melody, who has been this enigma at the center of the story, is left kind of open-ended, uncadenced.
It should really go without saying that this is going to be a full spoilers conversation. This is the 6th episode about the 6th issue of Spectrum. We're talking all of Spectrum in this conversation. It's so funny when you look at the numbers of these episodes. Like issue 5 is our most downloaded Spectrum book club episode yet. And a lot of those people did go back and are starting to listen to the earliest chapters. But it's interesting that people come into the middle of the book club. But if that's you, if you've come to the very end of the book club and you have not experienced the entire thing, go to the show notes. There are links to all of those previous episodes. Start at episode 1 and work your way to this moment.
Or don't live your life. There are no rules. Pee-wee wouldn't care.
That's true. And on that note, let's bring Rick and Dave into the love nest and talk about Spectrum number 6. Rick, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling.
Thank you for having me for this last issue.
Yes, yes. Last issue, last time? Well, time will tell, Rick. Time will tell. Dave, also, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling.
Thanks so much, you guys. I'm so hyped to be here, even if the inflection in my voice doesn't reflect that.
Somebody is exhausted.
Yesterday, I woke up at 3:20 a.m. and stayed awake the whole day until 11 p.m. My kid's canine teeth are coming in right now, and he's just really having a hard time with it. So you got to give the little guy support, you know. He's awesome.
Obviously, you know, you had both talked heavily about this final issue before you got the script, Dave. But I am wondering, you know, what was your anticipation regarding this final script from Rick? What were you hoping it would deliver?
Oh man. I think that's an interesting question, because I'm kind of like a weird, I don't know what's typical, but it feels like I'm a little bit of an atypical like consumer of media, because I just like let it roll over me without like much expectation. So like I am never the person who guesses the twist in a twist kind of situation. I'm always surprised by it, which is kind of fun. And I'm only when I'm like in full like analysis kind of like college brain mode am I thinking about like how could I improve this if I was like making this myself, you know what I mean? So when with Rick's script, I really was like just excited to see it, and I didn't really have a sense of expectation. I don't think it's a story that's really like, how do you put it? You know, some stories are like the quality of the whole thing is really dependent on like a last chapter being like this or that and justifying all of this stuff beforehand, you know? Maybe like the big example that everyone is probably thinking of is like Lost, right? Where like, even though we all enjoyed like a lot of Lost, most people now will be like, that show was horrible, because the ending wasn't what they wanted it to be. And I think that has to do with the nature of like what the story was and what it wasn't. And I don't think that Spectrum is necessarily a story that's like carried by, I need like to answer the mystery of what all of this is. I think it's more like a joyful exploration of form and like family relationships and comics medium, and then like with a real enthusiastic kind of exploration of like all these intertwining artistic and musical sort of like threads, you know. And so I was just excited to see what kind of threads Rick was going to sew together for this, and how it was all going to tie up and not tie up, because I know that we wanted to leave some loose ends at the end of this, that just in case we wanted to like pick it back up at some point. Yeah, and so honestly, I think like I was just more like really excited to I was totally in it when we were making it, and I wasn't really concerned about like, well, I hope it's this, I hope it's that. It was just like Rick could have like, I just totally trusted what he was going to do. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it. I know that's probably not the most insightful or interesting answer, but I think thankfully it's not a story that like needs to have questions, like a lot of questions answered. And I think that the answers that are present in this chapter, there are answers that are present in this chapter, but a bunch of them are kind of like blink and you miss them kind of things, or if you're not really like in it and like really paying attention to what's going on, you might be like, what is going on? What, you might be a little bit like lost. But that's what this whole I think this whole book has kind of been like that a little bit. It's like it's a book it's for readers that are like really paying attention. So
Rick, did you trust yourself the way that Dave trusted you with the final issue?
No, I mean, no, no, but that's why Dave was there, you know, that's why Dave is, and, you know, even before we worked together, great friend to have, great, like, kind of creative partner to share ideas with and rely on for advice. And yeah, and I mean that it goes both ways as well. You know, I didn't have any doubt that whatever the script had in it, the art was going to elevate it. You know, no matter what. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as the actual writing of it went, it was kind of interesting because it deviated pretty far from the initial outline in terms of kind of where it ended up. In particular, just kind of the whole, really kind of almost what became like the central conceit of it, which is kind of this like mirroring of the first issue, um, where you're not only kind of just the entire form of the first issue is mirrored, but even like the interior dialogue of the characters is now flipped. And that, I mean, that literally kind of wasn't in the original outline and kind of came just you know, sitting there with an open Word doc, like, okay, at page two, what happens? And you know, thinking through it, and then it just kind of dawned on me like, oh, you could literally, their perspectives is now almost kind of flipped here. And you know, works with the optics album being parallel mirrors, which like originally is kind of a nod to the art piece that Ada sees in issue two. But then, you know, it just seemed to like kind of click. And then once I had that, it kind of gave the whole thing like a very clear map to follow. So like the actual writing of it, once I had that idea, actually flowed pretty quickly. And you know, it's tricky because I'm not a huge fan of, like, when I grew up reading comics, part of the fun of them was that they kind of the disposability of them and kind of the ephemeral nature, and the way that like one came out one month, you read it and enjoyed it, and then maybe you didn't get the next one, you know, the next Amazing Spider-Man next month, but you got it 3 months from now, and you read that one, and that one's fun too, and you close, but it's, you know, it's a kind of a self-contained story. And the way that comics has kind of moved now to where everything is 6 issues, and it's a collected trade, like, is not necessarily my favorite format. And so part of just the initial idea as well was wanting to wrap up certain things so that hopefully when you read it, you do get the central thread is kind of resolved satisfactorily, hopefully, but that it didn't completely answer everything and kind of left, yeah, a lot of room for, you know, possible future stories. And, you know, I feel like David Lynch has come up a few times in our conversations, but like, you know, one thing he always said about Twin Peaks was, you know, as soon as you answer the mystery, like you don't have anything left, you know. And so he, and he says like what was beautiful was like the mystery that never ends and it just keeps going. And in that exact example, as soon as they resolve the mystery in Twin Peaks, there is a significant decline in quality.
Yes.
If anyone here has seen all of season 2 of Twin Peaks, can attest to. So yeah, I mean, it was a little tricky in that sense of, yeah, like I said, wanting, because the other thing I don't like is when you read a trade of something and it is basically should have been the first issue, but it actually now is 6 issues, and you're like, we just kind of got going here, and that feels very unsatisfactory to me. So like wanting it to feel like a complete thing in its own right, but then leaving a lot of openness for not just interpretation, but also, yeah, future stories that we could tell. And then, yeah, the other thing too is just like trying not to be so precious with that idea of like, okay, this has to be like a complete, each volume or each chapter works perfectly, like this big clockwork kind of thing. Like kind of embracing that monthly, like I think I mentioned before, is like writing each issue as if it were coming out every month and just being like, this is it's kind of its own thing as well as being part of the larger structure or whatever. So those were kind of the things that were on my mind writing it.
Yeah, and I guess like Rick's answer sort of makes me think of like, I guess some things I did anticipate with each issue of this, which is like, I think I don't remember if we actually even talked about this stuff, but it's definitely something that's been in my head for a long time, is sort of like feeling dissatisfied with those trade paperbacks that should be one issue, feeling dissatisfied with comics that only take like 35 seconds to read, like 22 pages, really wanting to like make works that are like ones that you can really sit and chew on, and it takes a little while to read. They have a certain amount of density at certain parts in the story as needed, and having the level of density kind of have its own breadth as well. So like not every page is like super dense, but like when the density happens, we're like not afraid to like put a lot of stuff on the page and everything. Echo's like really, really big, and there's like, let's say like 2 million of these soldiers at her feet. It's like, okay, I'll draw that, sure. I mean, obviously that's a total joy, like so much fun. So
Full
yeah.
kaiju battle in this comic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
well, you can see, well, your listeners, this is an audio medium, I know, but you can see I have a Godzilla doll that I've had basically since childhood. So it's subliminal in there.
The way this 6th issue functioned for me as a reader is it reminded me what the actual story was about. Reading Spectrum, one of the things that tickled my curiosity the most were the cameos and the side streets and the more philosophical questions. And a lot of my interpretational energy went down those avenues, and I got a lot of satisfaction out of going down those avenues.
Who is Joseph Rilk?
Brad got to the
Did you
bottom
figure
of
that-
it.
did
He
you
Okay.
gave
figure
me
that
a
out?
text today.
Wilhelm
Awesome.
Reich.
Yeah. And I did some
I did-
deep research, as in I read his Wikipedia. Well, I skimmed his Wikipedia.
I spent the last week listening to Patti Smith's Horses, and so the Birdland song unlocked that for me.
Yeah.
But there's another song that is inspired by the same historical event that you may have been reading about on Wikipedia. And the song has a pretty iconic music video as well. That's another hint. But anyhow,
Coming to this 6th issue and going like, oh, it really is about Ada healing her relationship with music, healing her relationship with creative endeavors, and how creative endeavors do take us away from some of those day-to-day things. They will take us away from home life at times or whatever. And then also healing her relationship with her dad. And then for Melody, it is just getting that sense of autonomy. She gets to choose how her music goes. It's not up to someone else to control her. I did get a lot of resonance of, oh, everything is coming back. Everything is full circle. And this has all been resolving this entire time. as I was getting lost in the side streets. I think that there is something to the story happening while I was distracted. And then finding the story at the end has its own kind of like, oh my God, this resolution has been coming. And when I wasn't even kind of looking.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, that reminds me. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read it, but I remember that feeling with I think it was the first volume of Planetary. It had a very similar kind of thing where each issue is kind of its own self-contained story, and then like at the end, like basically it's like actually this whole time we've been seeding this big event and yeah, I remember reading that and it having an impact on me. So that wouldn't be surprised if that's somewhere in the DNA.
Or like that TV show Fringe. Remember that show Fringe?
Hell yeah.
The first like 2 seasons of that, like the climax of that is so epic because you think it's like a Monster of the Week show, and then it's like, whoa, it's so cool.
Another aim for me in reading the 6th issue and then doubling back and rereading the first 5 issues is what is Echo all about actually? And what is George all about actually? And what is the tension between them? And so I'm just going to tell you my interpretation, and then I would appreciate some kind of A+ or a thumbs up or just some kind of compliment of some kind of what a great job I did. Echo's desire, like it's repeated so many times, her desire is like annihilation and returning to the silence from before George found the tree and started that whole existence of I mean, I guess us. But I got kind of stuck on the idea of them being called the sustained and the idea of suspensions, and the whole point of a suspension is to kind of draw you towards or yearn for some kind of like resolution. And so is Echo's motivation for finding melody, and she does say like, I need to know how this ends, I need to know how this song ends. Is Echo's motivation getting to the end of the song in order to find the silence? Is she like looking for some kind of like cadence? Is that something?
I thought it was going to be a theory, and then we were going to either thumbs up or A+.
Is that not a theory?
You formed it as a question. I mean, I enjoy hearing your interpretation.
But that's not it.
Well, he's not going to say.
He's not going to say
because he comes from
book club.
He comes from the David Lynch school.
I know, but then if Echo can't end, like silence is inevitable. There's always going to be an end to the song, right? So like Echo seems to be gone, but she can't really be gone.
Well, yeah, that's what I wonder, when we're left at the end of this issue with the George Parker character continuing to compose and create alternate tracks. I imagine that Echo appears in those tracks.
But there,
I feel like Echo. It's kind of like a similar, like in the end of Star Wars when Darth Vader is like zipping away on the TIE fighter, and it's like, is he gonna die or is he gonna come back in the sequel?
But Darth Vader is not a metaphor. I mean, I feel like Echo is a metaphor.
Well, I would say Joseph Campbell has some things to say about this.
It's not on them to answer that question for you.
I know.
I think it's cool what you're saying. I don't know what's going on either. I mean, really, I just like had a lot of fun drawing it.
It's interesting listening to Lisa and her takeaway from it, because what we did today is we read the 6th issue. We went to a cafe and we read the 6th issue together, basically. And then we came home and then we read issues 1 through 5. I actually read 1 through 6 again. And your takeaway, Lisa, seems to be focusing in on the push and pull of George and Echo. And I let go of that stuff and I really zeroed in on Ada and how her story with Leon, her father, became the actual emotional anchor for me on my reread.
Right.
And it's fascinating because the series begins with Melody and Ada doesn't come in until the second issue. And yet for me, the book is ultimately Ada's story.
It is Ada's story, and Ada's story ends where I feel like if we never see Ada again, that would be fine. You know, Ada's with her dad. She likes music again. She's enjoying records. You know, I think like Ada has reached some kind of resolution where I feel like Melody has not.
She literally says that she does, like, she's not ready to heal.
She's not ready to heal yet. We discover, like, not only is George not her dad, George doesn't even have her dad's face. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know what her dad looks like. To me, she's going on this entire separate journey that is separate from the girl that we saw losing her mind at the beginning of this story. Like, I do think that we could have some kind of like quantum leap moment where she returns back into her regular life, you know, having, you know, traveled through time. Quantum leap, exactly. I think the whole point of Melody, at least as it stands right now, is she needs to go on forever, you know, because if she ends, if Melody ends, like, that's the end of art, that's the end of human existence, you know, that's when apathy takes over. And then poof.
This just means you need to call Mad Cave and tell them, you know, the series is greenlit forever. And then Melody will exist forever. Perfect.
But like, you're talking about like how I seem to be stuck on George and Echo. It is interesting to have two villains with opposite and opposing intention, because that, to me, that implies that goodness, or at least people doing the good work, are somewhere between those two things. They're somewhere between the, we got to get a cadence, this song's got to end, we got to return to some kind of silence, and this song has to go on forever and ever, and we should feel all of the feelings whether we want them or not. We should be susceptible to all of the manipulations. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And it takes me back to the scene in the record shop where we have the one record store, you know, customers saying like, it should all be improv. Like, anything that's not improv is affectation. And then the other person going like, no, it really should be composed or at least somewhat planned out. Like, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? The two polar opposites are rarely true all of the time.
Yeah, and they kind of like have that horseshoe effect, right? Where like maybe really if Echo and George like got a cup of coffee and hung out and chatted, they'd realize that they probably see eye to eye on most things. Maybe. I don't know. Does Echo even have eyes? I don't know. But either way, like Lisa, what you're saying, it's solid gold stuff. Cool.
Thank you.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I love your interpretation, and I mean, yeah, I mean, I think too, there are elements of how the book was made that follow that and kind of is like interacting with those questions. As far as, like I said, I mean, there was an outline, but it deviated pretty far from the outline, especially this last chapter. But even in some of the other chapters, when I was rereading, or when issue 4 came out, I was realizing that there's an element that I couldn't quite remember. I was like, why did I include this? And then I remembered it's actually a vestige from like an idea that just didn't make it from like initial sketches to final thing, except in this one very, I mean, so esoteric no one would ever identify it except for me. And you know, so yeah, so to that point of like, there was a plan, but it also had a lot of improvisation, a lot of kind of like almost purposeful imperfection. I think it's really cool that the two of you could sit and read at a cafe and both come away with like different focuses, different questions, different, you know, things that interest you about it. Like, something worked in the sense of like, part of the goal of the book is to spark the questions that you're talking about or the things that you're thinking about. So yeah.
I think it's a good. I think like it's a fun strategy to have like two main characters, one who's like very human and one who's like struggling with that. Like what like the, you know, and so I think it makes it for a compelling kind of. Some readers are going to be like 100% about the character who doesn't belong and relate to that character that doesn't belong, and then some readers are going to be like, I am completely, I know Ada, I know this character, like I've met this person, you know, and really like be not maybe not be quite as invested in the cosmic stuff, you know what I mean, and be more invested in the in that like I think the really like lovely story of Ada and her dad. So it's cool. It's a I like it. I think it's a fun way to structure it. You know.
I do really appreciate the resolution of Ada's story, and I feel like it's something that Brad and I talk about all of the time, where like we watch a ton of cooking competition shows and people are on Hell's Kitchen and they're being screamed in the face by Gordon Ramsay, and they're like, I'm just doing this for my baby daughter, and you go like, are you really? Like, is this what your daughter really needs for you to be on Hell's Kitchen blue team? You know what I mean? Like, is that really the thing? You know, and I like the fact that Leon's apology is like, I've been telling you I've been doing my music for you and your mom, but the fact of the matter is I was doing my music for my music, and it was, as you suspected, you were my second priority the entire time. And I feel like art is a generous pursuit and it is a selfish pursuit, and the truth is in the center of those two things.
Well, we also spoke about this a little bit last time, how art is a kind of madness as well. And Leon, it's my interpretation on this is my third time reading the final issue, my second time reading all 6 issues. In your face, Lisa.
Yeah, he is winning in terms of repetitions.
And
but I read better than
if you're
him.
not
So like
reading-
me reading once is like him reading twice.
Listen,
Or, no, reverse.
if you're not reading versus other readers, then you're not doing it right. You have to read versus something.
Right, exactly. But my takeaway reading it again is that Leon, it's not so much as of a selfish act that Leon is taken over by the madness of creation. He's compelled to create.
But he still makes the choice. I think the choice is the thing that's important.
Yeah.
You know, he could have chosen.
Yes, but what I find interesting is like, does he make a choice?
I think he does. I think the temptation is important to who he is and important to the apology, because if he was compelled and he was controlled and he did not make a choice, he'd have nothing to apologize for.
But can't both things also be true?
No, not in this case.
Okay.
I'm being silly, but that's how I feel.
I think the only thing I would add to throw in there is that there is some indication that part of the decision of why he has been gone is this idea of he's protecting her from these visions, these things that George has told him about. So that is also at play in the mix of like part of the thinking as well. Not to negate anything that you all just said, which is fun. I like being able to sit back and watch you two argue about what it means.
Yeah, it's a hell of a thing to then trap you two in it and then just like subject you to our theories and our arguments. Yeah, talk about a selfish act.
I have a question.
Go.
Rick, when
Yes.
you deviate from your outline, is it a good feeling or is it a bad feeling?
In general, I mean, it can kind of depend. I would say in this specific case, I would say it's kind of like the best part of writing. Doesn't happen all the time, but there are instances where and I mean, you hear people talk about this, and you know, can kind of roll your eye where it's like the character spoke to me, but it is like it is actually something that does happen where like suddenly just something that you never would have guessed was about to happen or the character was about to do just kind of like pops in your head, and you're like, great. Like I mean, it kind of reminds me of there's several songwriters have talked about their some famous instances of songs that were they basically just picked up the guitar, started playing, and 3.5 minutes later, like they had written a classic song, and they're just kind of like, I don't even know where that came from. So it gets to that kind of, you're in that you call it a flow state, or just kind of like it feels very like you follow that because it's so like outside of your control. Like it just feels like, well, this must be the way to go, kind of feeling. There are other cases where like you get to your part in your outline, and you suddenly realize like that I've made a terrible mistake, and have to reverse engineer your way out. That doesn't feel as good. So this case was much better.
What, hey Rick, what do you remember what moment it was in this sixth issue that was the flip the script kind of moment? If you wouldn't mind, if you don't want to share that, that's okay, but I'm curious.
I mean, really, kind of the final. Well, not, I mean, final, but the kind of like the climactic scene between Ada and Leon was like kind of. I mean, it's the kind of thing in an outline where you're just like, well, some kind of catharsis will happen, but like that, and particularly the way that it happens and the like kind of the formal execution of it was really unexpected, and just felt like kind of like the perfect pairing of content and form. And I mean, literally, I mean, this happened several times through making the book, but I would write something and have a picture in my head of like how it would kind of look on the page, and like basically I would get however long later Dave's working on it, sends me the page, and it's like exactly what was in my head, like which I mean, like I think it's just like kind of a testament to, I mean, like our connection, our friendship, and like us being is such on the same wavelength that part of that trust as well, just knowing like, oh yeah, well he's gonna get exactly kind of what I'm going for without having to like do an Alan Moore like scroll,
Mm-hmm.
panel one, like the dust on the bookcase is just so or whatever. But yeah.
Cool. For me, like whenever I'm in that spot with my outlines where I'm like, oh no, this is like bad, something bad has happened. Or I have done something bad. It's not has happened. Let's be real. I have to take ownership of it. I've made a huge mistake. Usually, what I do after despair is I just like really think of like what's the opposite of what I expect would happen. Like, what is the weirdest thing that could happen here? And then I usually start there and then like try to like find the right trajectory from that point. I'm not saying that like it should be anybody's strategy. I'm just saying like that tends to be where I go when I'm like in this weird spot where I'm like, what is something that, I don't know. Because those moments do like are such a drag, and at the same time like it does happen. I mean, I think I've spoken to you guys about like how one thing I really admire about Rick's writing is that he has that comfort level to kind of like try stuff, where it's like for me, everything has to be like just so when I get to the point where I'm drawing it, I have to like when I'm drawing for myself, I'm not like well, I'll figure out how to like unruin this part like later on. So I have to know how everything like wraps up at the end. And it's to kind of contrast with what Rick said earlier. Like I have like the opposite problem or mindset or whatever, where it's like instead of sort of like being like I'm gonna leave some things like unbuttoned at the end, I'm gonna kind of leave some questions unanswered at the end. For me, like I feel like I can only write when I have an ending. I can only really start something when I know the ending, and it's like kind of another kind of problem, you know. Where this is like confession, right? It's like
Yeah.
this is no one's really listening to this, right? So at this point, but like every time I've pitched a book that's like that's just my own book, I look at other creators' pitches sometimes, and I'm like, you don't even know like how it's gonna end sometimes, or that it's so vague, like the ending of it is so vague, and they're so comfortable just being like, yeah, and then the ending happens, and it's like whatever that is. And working and collaborating a little bit more with writers and stuff like that, and just kind of being like amazed at like how comfortable they are like starting something without knowing the ending. That every pitch that I've done that's like my own thing against like any common wisdom is like probably like each one is like a year of like work to get it to the point where I'm even pitching it. Thankfully, I've never like had a pitch like turned down, for something, but like it just feels like other people are like the when you hear like advice from like writers about like pitching and stuff, they're like, make sure you have like 5 backup pitches just in case they are curious about your first pitch. And I'm like, holy smokes, like I can only do like one thing at a time, and I spend way too long like fiddling with it and fiddling with it until it's just right without any sort of like assurance that it's going to be published. And I'm like, I got to figure out a better way. I got to be smarter about this. This is not very smart. But anyway, I think I'm getting a little bit smarter about it now in this conversation in the last like 2 minutes.
Let's go ahead and pause for just a moment because we got to hear from our sponsors. Love sci-fi, love horror, love fantasy, love action?
I do.
Then 2000 AD is the greatest comic you're not reading. 2000 AD has a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog to Rogue Trooper, Shakara Halo Jones, and the poor sod slogging across the cursed earth in the Helltrekkers.
In every weekly issue, you'll get 5 action-packed thrills from incredible creators such as Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Arthur Wyatt, Henry Flint, Alex DeCampi, Dan Abnett, and many more. Get a print subscription to your door every week, and your first issue is free.
Or subscribe digitally, get free back issues, and download DRM-free copies of each issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. And all subscribers get amazing offers like money off vouchers and exclusive products.
Head to 2000AD.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app and start reading today. Link in the show notes.
One of the most discouraging things that happened when I was classroom teaching was when I would see other people's teaching outlines with lesson plans. And my lesson plans were always like intensely detailed, where I would describe everything that I was going to do, perhaps some of the things that I was going to say. Like mine were long. And then I would see somebody else's lesson plans and they would just be bullet points. And I go like, how does this person function? And I quit teaching. So
Probably the hardest class I've ever taught was an American music history class, because there was no making stuff. There was no it wasn't like, all right, I'm gonna teach you guys how to make like comics and graphic novels, because then like a huge part of the class is like me like triaging like exactly what needs to be done for each student's work. Like, well, here's where it's falling apart, and I can really diagnose it, or like running a rehearsal for like a jazz band or something like that is like so easy, because I don't have to like prepare like a lecture that is precisely like 55 minutes long or whatever it is. Anyway, I feel that. I was always the bullet point person, or like the even like worse than that, kind of in terms of that aspect of things. And my wife is more like the kind of teacher who's really, really, really organized and spends a lot of time pre-planning. And can I just say, she's amazing. Like when she teaches, it's like so good. So I admire that level of organization.
I don't plan my rehearsals. I mean, I plan my rehearsals, but I don't write it down because I know how rehearsals work.
Yeah.
Rehearsals make sense. Giving people knowledge they don't want is really, it's hard to motivate yourself to do that.
I mean, that's its own weird thing about teaching, isn't it?
This is a question I've tried to ask creators many times, and I've never been able to articulate it perfectly, but I think it goes with our like outline conversation where you find yourself like deviating from the outline. But like when I read a story or I encounter a story, it's changing my mind. Like as I'm encountering the story, it's entering me and I'm becoming a new person. As you're writing Spectrum or drawing Spectrum, do you feel the story changing you as you're making it? Do you find yourself deviating from the outline because you're not the same person who made the outline in the first place because now you've experienced the story?
I think that's definitely a thing that happens. I think that let me just tell a little story about a guy I went to school with here in Rochester at Eastman. I was a doctoral student and he was an undergrad. His name is Levi Sailua. And Levi, if you're listening, I seriously doubt that he's listening, but if you're listening, I love you, man. You're amazing. And this guy, he was a jazz composition major, and cool as a cucumber, just the coolest guy. And in the sense of, like, whenever he had to compose something, he would be finishing what he was composing the morning of like the deadline, right? And for me, I've always been someone, I learned this really like way too late to really adjust it. I've always been really motivated by anxiety. What I would do for like papers when I was in my doctorate and having multiple classes with like big papers due and deadlines and stuff, I would set the due date in my calendar a week early from the actual due date so that I could finish the paper or the composition early. And I was just so motivated by getting the work done. I suppose the end thing is like whenever we would, so I was in composition like class with him, like, you know, and when it came time to share the music at the end, his music was always coolest, the most clever solutions, the best work, right? And I always felt like mine was like lacking in some way. And I think it's that I was only motivated by like completing it, and not motivated by finding like the right solutions for any given moment. So I would always choose like maybe the first or second solution that I would come across and be like, oh, thank God I can move on. I can push closer to the end, instead of really like being in the moment with that problem and like living with it and being comfortably uncomfortable in that problem long enough to find the best solution, or at least a better solution, and have the faith in like saying like, well, I'm going to figure this out and in time, and I know that I'll figure it out in time, but I know that this solution isn't the solution that's going to figure it out. I think, Lisa, in a way, like, not that Rick or I are like we're like procrastinating through this thing, but I think that in a way, like what you're talking about in a way is sort of like that strategic procrastination where you maybe finishing an outline is kind of like really understanding the problems that you're the narrative problems that you're dealing with or whatever, and then you start the actual work of making the thing. And over the course of that long process of making that thing, in the back of your mind there's like all these little elves that are working while you're not actively thinking about it, and all of a sudden like a better solution will like pop into your head and you're like, oh well, I have to like I can make that solution better, make this solution better. Whereas if you had locked in, really like committed and locked in and shut the door in your mind when you finish the outline, then those better solutions won't come. And so I think it's like if you let a problem into your brain and maybe find a solution that's like okay, with the understanding that you are free to change your mind if you want. I think that's a really good strategy inside of the creative process to kind of like take advantage, because really like human like procrastination, like the reason why students do it is because, like, let's be real, like it works, right? It can be like a real secret weapon of like putting the work off until you find like a smarter way to do it or a better solution. And so yeah, like I think it really does change who you are and how you work to like do the work. Definitely, like I think my understanding of how I work as an visual artist, as a comic book artist, really this book transformed all of that, to be honest, like more than any other project I've worked on, to the point that now when I'm like collaborating, like this isn't like a in any way like a dig against like Michael Conrad's script for Plague House. The level of like density on an average page of Spectrum versus Plague House is like really different. And so getting the scripts for Plague House, it was like I could do that work so quickly because I really kind of like had been through the gauntlet of like this script, which is like above and beyond, kind of like in such a strange place. And so it does change you. It some maybe sometimes in specific ways, and maybe sometimes in just sort of like understanding your own how you process stuff and everything like that. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad Dave went first because that was a great answer. And yeah, I mean, that question is really good. And honestly, I mean, it might sound dramatic, but I mean, you asked like, did this book change you? I mean, it changed my life. It's a very personal story. And the things that it's kind of talking about and kind of the things that are in the story, my perspective on completely changed by the final issue writing it. And had I not sat down to write it, like I would never have had the epiphanies that I had in doing it. And that's happened a few other times in writing things. And I mean, part of that I think is, there's a difference when you kind of sit down, depending on what you're working on. If you are doing something that's more of like a genre exercise, your level of personal commitment, although you are always going to be in it, usually is going to be somewhat diminished by the fact of kind of the sandbox that you're playing in a little bit, and maybe exploring some deep part of yourself isn't at the absolute forefront. Whereas with this story, I mean, it basically, through our initial conversations after doing the first issue, and Dave, I mean, I remember, kind of saying, him saying like, we really need like a strong emotional hook to this thing to kind of like, kind of anchor the readers. And so, I was like, in my mind too, I'm like, okay, this is my first shot at published work. I've been doing independent comics for like a decade or whatever, but this is the first thing that people are going to read. And like, kind of what you see in a lot of like first albums or first movies by people, it's like, well, this might be my last shot, so I'm just going to throw everything into it. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be as personal as I can make it. And what I was thinking while Dave was talking, and I was thinking about that a little bit, it's like we were talking about this notion of like the selfishness of art. I mean, what's more selfish than writing a graphic novel just for me? Like just for my own clarity and kind of working through things. What do you do with that? Or is it selfish? I mean, again, that's like the theme in the book, so that's open to interpretation. But the work of doing this book and having the opportunity to work on it with Dave, I mean, literally changed my life and changed, for the better. Not to sound dramatic.
I like sounding dramatic.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not surprising given the book, right? Yeah. It feels like a book in which every piece of you is in it. And I think we could sense that before we ever had a conversation with you, and having these conversations with you every month for the last 6 months and then some, it's even more apparent. You also appear in the book on the last page. Both of you do. You're at the concert with a young Rick Gersley. And we haven't talked a lot about Rick in our conversations about Spectrum. Rick in the coda is the journalist, the chronicler. You're Rick Quinn. This is Rick Gersley. Like, you're the chronicler. You're the journalist of the Spectrum world. Like, how do you see that character's function in Spectrum?
Originally, it was just kind of an excuse for in the final page to kind of do this kind of like meta kind of layer to the story. The first issue ends with the Rick Gersley character is, it's saying that he's working on this project that's going to be this magnum opus of the all of music and sound and art. but he's struggling to come up with a title, and then he's at a used bookstore in North Carolina, and he comes across this old magazine that has an image on the cover from this band that inspires him. And I mean, that's literally just like what happened, how I came up with the title of Spectrum. And so I thought it was like a fun, just kind of like flavor to put in there. It's very indebted to the series Mind Management, the Matt Kint series. Every issue in that kind of ends with like a final page that is kind of done in the same mode, where it's a little outside of the story, but kind of commenting on, kind of these like tangential aspects, is just kind of like a little, not Easter egg, but kind of in that flavor. So, when writing the first issue, is just kind of included, not with any notion of kind of where that would go. And then just as we continued, I was like, okay, this is a fun piece to have in, and we can use it to allude to things to come, or kind of comment on things within the issue, or just kind of use it as another channel to communicate some part of the story or some part of the lore, that kind of thing. And then the final issue. So I mean, y'all only have the digital copy, but the physical copy on the back has a ticket stub scan from the Papa Legba show. So Rick Gersley was there, for sure. And so I think by the time of the last issue, I mean, it also kind of culminates. So it's like the concert that the Rick Gersley character goes to, the music there is like very important to the overall story, and especially like the first issue, and kind of the inspiration behind the whole thing. So it felt nice as like a way to comment on that. And then it literally ends with the ding of a triangle, which a very famous, potentially very inspirational album of music also ends with a kind of oddly with a single note of a triangle being rung out. So we wanted a nod to that as well.
And it's interesting to me to include a journalist in a story about art, and like, there's the conversation of those that what makes the difference between those that create and those that consume. And here we are with Rick, who is consuming and processing into like his own form of art in chronicling this. Like, does he join? Like, would he be invited into the Prism ensemble?
And I think so. I mean, if you just take music as an example, I mean, there are plenty of music writers who I think absolutely are, artists in their own right. And, the best ones are ones that, that write about music that, you might otherwise not even care about, but love to read. There's a writer, Hanifa Durkheeb, who wrote a book called They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us. And it's full of music essays. And one of the essays is about Pete Wentz, the bass player from Fallout Guy, or Fallout Boy, whatever that. Mm-hmm. Fallout Boy, Fall Guy was a movie. By any other writer, I would be like, I don't care about Fallout Boy. But I read that essay and I loved it. And I loved all the other, all the other essays in that. And so like, he's an example of someone like that. Or like Grail Marcus, is a very famous like musicologist, music writer, who like is somebody who I mean, and Grail Marcus is also very indicative of kind of like some of the inspiration of Spectrum, in the sense of like, he wrote this book Lipstick Traces, which is kind of like this like phantasmagorical exploration of like punk music, but then also like Dadaism, and goes all over the map kind of thing. And so I'd say music critics, film critics, anyone writing down their critical thoughts, just as much of an artist as anyone else.
Who wouldn't make the cut? Who's not getting into the Prism ensemble?
Podcasters.
Salieri not making the cut.
Oh, come on. F. Murray Abraham?
F. Murray Abraham would make the cut. He's a great actor.
Rick, Dave, this has been so fun and so special within our little podcast lifespan. We really have not done anything quite like it before, and we hope to do more of it. We would love, to continue this format with other creators and subject them to our Zoom room and our theories about their creations month after month. But to do so with the two of you has been really special.
It's been an honor, like a literal honor.
Hey, the honor's all ours. I think it's really like, it's weird to put it this way, maybe, but it's almost like a dream come true to have a work that to have people read it so closely. This is how I want the work to be read. So it was a real thrill. Yeah, really great. And your guys' thoughts about the book are so great and everything. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, echo everything Dave said. I mean, yeah, the honor is ours. Yeah, I mean, from the first episode onward, I mean, I learned about this book. So I'm very appreciative of the insights as far as that goes. And then also just, yeah, I mean, being able to meet every month and talk about it. Because Dave knows this, but I basically kind of refuse to engage with any feedback or reviews or people posting. Like, I just kind of don't like, whether it's positive or negative. I just think it's for the best to kind of like phase that out a bit. But so this is really kind of almost the only real opportunity, other than the very hilarious review that Dave did send me because he knew it would make me laugh. Where the guy said that I forget what he said exactly, but basically he was like, I've read issue 5 and I finally understand, but it would take me 45 minutes to explain to you. Also, if you're not smoking weed when you read this, like, you're doing it wrong or something like that.
I can find what he said. It was a great review on
very funny.
Comic Geeks, League of Comic Book Geeks. He says, if you smoke weed and you're not reading this, you're doing it wrong. I love that.
Which made me chuckle. But yeah, so this has been, yeah, like I said, one of the only forums really where being able to talk about it in this kind of way. And yeah, I mean, like I said, informative of the book itself and just kind of like my thinking of, comics in general and moving forward. It's given me a lot to think about and a lot to process. So yeah, very appreciative. And yeah, I can't even imagine like how much time it takes to edit these and all the social media posts and all that stuff. So yeah, that's a lot of work. So definitely appreciate it.
Our pleasure, as always. And it's not the last episode with you two, because we're going to be bringing you back on for the trade paperback, and we're going to do the speed dating version of this entire 6 months.
I mean, hey,
I have a bit.
I'm down.
I have a bit. I won't make you edit it back into where the bit would actually be funny, but I am going to say it now.
Okay.
Okay. So imagine you just told us about that review, right? And I'll go, crazy coincidence. You know who wrote that review? Levi Silua.
No.
Yay! Good bit.
Perfect. I love it.
I needed to get Dave's tepid chuckle.
Love it.
And there you go. That was our conversation, our final conversation for now with Rick and Dave, all about Spectrum. All 6 issues are out now from Mad Cave Studios, and we begin the process of eagerly anticipating the trade paperback release.
I have a question to pose for you, because we've had this conversation. I don't think we've ever actually had it on the podcast.
Okay.
But I feel like because of Spectrum, maybe you have changed your mind.
Oh, interesting.
So there was this story on the Reddit thread, Am I the Asshole? Where this person had a friend who was writing a novel, and the novelist said, like, this story was inspired by you, and I would love for you to read it. And so the friend read it and found out that the novelist had just done a novelization of her life.
Yeah, an adaptation. Yeah. Basically like thefted her life.
So I told this story to Brad.
Like a year
Brad
ago, maybe
is
2
like,
years ago.
Well, is the friend a novelist? Was the friend going to use that story? And I was like, no. And then you were like, well, then it's fine. Then it was fine for the novelist to steal their story because it wasn't going to be a novel. And I said, like, when you live your life and you're making choices in your life, that is in and of itself a creative act. So if you, like, to me, I feel like
my life story is my intellectual property because I wrote it. I might not make a movie of it. I might not make a novel of it. But if somebody was like, okay, I'm going to write a movie and it's going to be about this girl, Bisa, who likes comic books, and she has a nerdy wife because they've changed some details. She's got this nerdy wife and they're doing it together, you know, and then they go on a road trip and hijinks ensue. I'd be like, dude, that's my intellectual property. That's my life. So to me, I go like, everybody's a little bit of an artist because everybody is creating their life. Does that make sense? So now if I were to ask you that question again, do you think that the novelist has the right to write a novelization of their friend's story?
For me, it's impossible to answer the question without knowing the person and reading the book, because I do think it's a matter of degrees. I think you can be inspired by a person and then write a story based on that inspiration. If you are just plotting their life, that's not really writing. That's not really creating. If you're just going and copying their A to B to C to D to E to F. But if you write about Bisa and her wife and their road trip from comic shop to comic shop, and then hijinks ensue, and one of those hijinks is a murder, like that, I don't have a problem with that. I would actually, if someone writes a
fan
murder
fiction
mystery
about us
that's inspired by Brad and Lisa and Comic Book Couples Counseling, I don't know. I don't know.
I say if anybody who knows us reads that book, like another issue which the commenters in Reddit said was like, well, anybody who doesn't know you wouldn't recognize that it's your life because you're not a public figure. But like, to me, if someone who knows us reads that book and recognizes us and goes like, this couple is clearly inspired by you, that's our intellectual property.
But again, I don't mind that if that is a launching pad to a story, right? Like, if they are just literally writing a day-by-day journal entry of Brad and Lisa, that's one thing. But if it's if we inspire some characters on a murder mystery, a science fiction adventure, a cowboy western, I'm fine with that.
But there has to be some kind of thing where art happens, where there is a true departure.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's the function of Am I the Asshole? I mean, I'm going to use the word spectrum, but I don't mean like in the comic. Like everything, there is a lot of gray between theft, adaptation, inspiration.
Yes.
And to me, if this person reads this novel, and every single person who reads the novel says, this girl just took your life and wrote it down, then that person isn't being particularly artful. You know what I mean? Like, that person is not creating any kind of rainbow bridges between realities.
And what I'm
first
saying
novel.
in this theoretical conversation that you experience on Reddit is I can't judge it without knowing the people and reading the work.
And that's why you don't read Am I the Asshole? I don't need all the information. I don't need all the information. I just want to be judging. Yes, that novelist, I'm proud of them that they could sit down and write a whole novel, but I think they're the asshole.
I think there's also something to be said of like, well, you didn't do the thing. You know, like...
That's where you offend me. That's where you offend me. She did do the thing. She led the life interesting enough that her friend is like, this should be a novel, and I'm writing it.
So did me having all these conversations with Rick Quinn and Dave Chisholm and reading Spectrum change my position from 2 years ago when we originally had this conversation off mic? I guess not.
Yeah, now he's just going like, yeah, pharmacists can have blue hair. That's artistic.
Am I the asshole? And my answer is maybe.
We're all some degree. We're all on the spectrum of asshole, which is fine.
And here, Lisa, sadly, I think is where we're going to have to put a button on our Spectrum Book Club series.
No, I hate it when things end.
I love the format of this. It is different from our other episodes, like this idea that we can talk to the creators as their book is being published monthly. I would like to do this again with Rick and Dave, obviously, but with any other creator that is willing to go on a half-a-year journey with us.
Yeah.
This has been just like really fun. And like, it's a different way to approach comics and the conversation around comics and storytelling.
It's a huge commitment, and it was a huge commitment by Rick and Dave, and I feel like they are just so freaking generous and patient with me.
Like, I am deeply honored that they chose to do this with us, and I'm just hoping that there might be some other people who would want to replicate this experience. So let us know. Reach out. But for our next episode, Patrick Horvath returns to the podcast.
Yay!
Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees is getting its sequel, Rite of Spring. Next Monday is FOC, Final Order Cutoff. So we sat down with Patrick to talk where Sam the Bear is going after the events of that first miniseries.
She's grown bangs.
The new issue, we've read it. It's incredible. It does all the things that the first issue of Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees did, but then twists it in a really delicious way. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that conversation.
If you are enjoying the book club experience with Brad and Lisa, you can join our Patreon where we do our Swamp Thing book club, Gallivanting Through the Green. We are doing an issue-by-issue read-through of Alan Moore's iconic run. We have gone through issue 24-ish.
Yes, we just started, basically.
Yeah, so you can catch up.
We must really be enjoying the book club format because we are actually also launching an in-person book club here in the DMV area in Herndon, Virginia, actually, at the brand new comic book themed coffee shop, Meanwhile Coffee. On June 8th at 4 o'clock, we will be discussing Helen of Windhorn by Tom King and Bilquis Evely.
We are there to discuss it with you. We're going to be doing this old school style, sitting in a circle, taking turns sharing our thoughts. So come having read the books.
Yes, please. Lisa is putting together a discussion packet.
That's right.
And we will have buttons for everybody. We've made up official comic book club buttons, illustrated by Meredith McLaren of Black Cloak and Crumble fame.
Then on June 29th, we'll have our next comic book film club at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. It will be James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. That's the good one. Tickets are not on sale yet, but should go up shortly. And we're co-sponsored, as always, by Four Color Fantasies.
I was arguing with Eric. He likes both Suicide Squads
But
quite a bit.
He does agree that the James Gunn one is better.
That is true. That is
and
true.
It's a very personal choice for him.
But it did make me want to go back and revisit just Suicide Squad.
You enjoy that.
It's been a while. Oh, you're not going to join me?
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, Brad, I'm going to grab the stapler. I'm going to put up some signs about my new club. It's going to be a club for people who enjoy book clubs. We just sit around and talk about like the various book clubs that we're in.
Drink a lot of wine.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a wine guy, to tell you the truth. Where can our
Mocktails.
listeners... I'm not a mocktail person either. Why are you creating these fictions?
I don't know. What's your thing? What are you going to drink at book club?
At Meanwhile Coffee? I'll probably get that matcha, like iced matcha with the raspberry
at your book club.
Oh, my book club? I'm just going to drink smoothies made of books. Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
So dumb.
You're dumb.
You can find me on most social medias at MouthDork, including Blue Sky. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, send them to Jesse Lonergan at Jesse Lonergan on Blue Sky or on Instagram, Jesse.Lonergan. Lisa, where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on some social medias. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you choose. We're everywhere. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon where you get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, the way you said that really tickled
I know,
my
I
fancy.
started to... It's like when you're walking and you trip, but you just keep walking.
If you'd like to reach
do
out
like a
and
little
touch us
jog.
electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
If you'd like us to touch you physically, you could wear our merch.
Oh.
tpublic.com. You sound disappointed. tpublic.com/stores/comic book couples counseling divided by hyphens.
I reversed it from the way I usually do
I
it.
know. I liked it. You're having fun.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review or leave a comment on the show while you're there?
We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
Bum bum ba bum bum ba ba.
It's the final spectrum. Do-do-do-do. Okay, are we ready?